So today our theme of study is Savitri as a Shakti avatar. And in studying this, we are continuing our series of collective contemplations on Savitri and the mother, which we started last year. And so we are continuing that. We are close to the birthday of the mother. And Savitri as a Shakti avatar, this theme, as I have laid out the schedule for the day, we will consider it in a relaxed fashion so that we can absorb it. And if it takes 2 days, I'm supposed to be back in April, we will continue on that day. In case we are not hurrying through it, in other words. We are going to go through it as the passages demand and as we all feel with regard to assimilation of the material. So, the idea of a Shakti avatar. This is a new idea, in a sense. We don't come across this idea much in traditional writing, whether in India or in the West. Hints of this idea can be found in other literatures, but Sri Aurobindo is drawing on this idea from the Veda. And it isn't clear in the Veda either. There is no direct reference to any idea of the Shakti avatar or any avatar in the Veda. But as we'll see, Sri Aurobindo is moving from a story which is in the Mahabharata to propose that this actually is coming out of the Veda, the story of Savitri, that it is a Vedic tale and that it has been lost in the Veda and only by oral tradition returning in the Mahabharata. And he explores much deeper, more profound mystical ideas in the story. And the central theme of the story is that of a Shakti avatar. So that is what Sri Aurobindo feels about this text, and that's what he deals with. He brings forth in this book Savitri. The book Savitri is about Savitri as a Shakti avatar. That's what the essence of the book is. So we'll talk a little bit about that and look at the passages that really heighten this idea. So the avatar, idea of the avatar itself, is not a common idea. It is present in a few traditions. In India itself, it makes its beginnings a little late, say around maybe the 2nd century BC, considering the very early Vedas and later Upanishads, etc. There's no sign of the idea of an avatar in all these texts. So the first notion of the avatar, in a way, comes to us in Buddhism. Buddhism will not own the idea of the avatar, but there are many ways in which we can see that the idea first enters through Buddhism. And then it, in a theological sense, in a philosophical, metaphysical sense, it makes its full appearance in the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna is shown as an avatar. The theory of the avatar begins to be given a voice in the Gita. And later in the Puranas, from the 4th to 8th century and then up to the 10th century, this idea of an avatar, particularly the Vaishnav Puranas, the Vishnu Puranas, this idea of the avatar is further expanded and is given a new kind of meaning. Of course, we also see parallelly the idea of the avatar, as we would call it, or the incarnation, appearing in Christianity, in the figure of Christ. So these are the main traditions that have dealt with the notion of the avatar. The avatar is an incarnation of the Supreme. In other words, the Supreme taking a physical, living form. So, if we look at the metaphysics of the avatar, in the Indian system, we find the first idea of this, first approach to this in stories connected with Krishna. I mentioned the Buddha, but I will not go into that because you have to extrapolate it. The fundamentals of the idea of the avatar are present in Buddhism, in early Buddhism. And they are ideas that travel and are more developed in the idea of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So, in early writings on Krishna, Krishna is seen as a superhuman being. And the reason he is considered to be an avatar are the superhuman power. So there are two reasons given in early writings on Krishna. One is he comes to rid the forest of these demons. See, so he really is a powerful supernatural being who can destroy demons, and he destroys the demons of the area that he's living, which is in close to Vrindavan. That's the area that he grows up in. And then a later version of Krishna writing makes the central purpose for his coming to be the destruction or killing of the evil king Kamsa. This becomes the second way in which he is shown as a supernatural being who comes for this purpose. But a more profound metaphysics of the avatar appears in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, the reason for the avatar is declared by Krishna to be the bringing back of dharma. So the idea that, as he says, whenever the world falls far away from dharma into the pit of adharma, I take birth. In other words, there's this notion that there is some supreme being that is reborn, that takes birth to rid the world of adharma and bring it back to dharma. So this term dharma, what is this term dharma? Dharma, today it means a variety of things, including religion, some kind of moral law. Right? But dharma, in the metaphysical sense, as it is used in repeated early texts, is that which holds together. Dharyate Jagat means that which holds the world together, whatever holds the world together. So what holds the world together is a cosmic law, the law of togetherness, the law of unity, the law of oneness. And so, in even the notion of holding together the world is a early metaphysics which actually is the very basis of most of the philosophical development of Indian spirituality. It takes its foundations in what is called the Purusha Sukta in the Veda. And this particular hymn of the Rig Veda is going to be referred to in the Bhagavad Gita as well. In a way, Krishna is Purusha, which means person. So, the idea over there is that the ultimate reality is a person. It's not a human person, but it is a person, a divine person. That is the ultimate reality. And this ultimate reality, the person, Purusha, fragments itself. In other words, it's the term sacrifice is used for it. It sacrifices itself. And to what does it sacrifice itself? To whom does it sacrifice itself? If it's the one being. It sacrifices itself to its own potentiality for multiplicity. The one sacrifices itself to its own infinity. So this self-sacrifice takes two forms. The one who is the absolute one, there is no other than that one, is also self-conscious. The one conscious being becomes the opposite of itself. It becomes first unconscious, completely unconscious, in a gradation of unconsciousness, down to the bedrock of inconscience. As Sri Aurobindo uses that term, the inconscient. And it fragments its unity into multiplicity, into infinity, infinite particles, the dust of the earth, the molecular dust of the earth. So this is the self-sacrifice of Purusha. Now, the Purusha being one and self-conscious is the image of Dharma. This is Dharma itself. And as I say that, I also bring your notice to the fact this word Dharma is an important word. It's an important word. It makes its beginnings in the Veda. But it's a really important word in early Buddhism, where Buddha calls himself the Dharma. He is the Dharma. And it's in this sense that Purusha is the Dharma. Purusha is the Dharma because it's the one absolute being that holds everything together. The multiplicity is the unity of the Dharma. If it becomes unconscious and fragments itself, disperses itself into infinity, then Dharma has moved into adharma, the opposite of itself. Chaos. Out of this chaos, the unity is going to be built back again. This is, in fact, the Purusha Sukta, which is only a hymn that talks of the fragmentation of being, of Purusha, of person, is actually only a hymn. In practice, this particular hymn, even today in the Himalayan states, is a ritual of the reconstitution of Purusha, How does Purusha become one again? So the idea is that there is a gravitation, a spiritual gravitation that is pulling the one into this chaos, state of chaos. Out of that, it is trying to become one again. But every attempt to do that makes it slip back into the chaos, because there is a constant force to break things up back into the inconscience and the multiplicity. This is a kind of a dialectic. On the one hand, you have this force that's breaking everything down. On the other hand, you have the memory of the one in every particle of that dispersion trying to gather it back into the one. Yes?
Could that be related to the scientific concept of entropy?
Yes.
Disorderliness?
Yes, it could be. Certainly, it could be. So, you could say even the idea of the heat death of the universe is the notion of absolute adharma, see, at the physical level. But within it, there is this force that is trying to bring it back to the one. This two forces are, this is the fundamental duality of the cosmos. Yes?
I was going to request you to repeat the last few lines, just one more time. The last explanation.
So, what I'm saying is that this idea of the sacrifice of Purusha, this idea is, I'm repeating it in a different way because it's
Sure.
Every return is a new return. That's the very meaning of avatar, right? So, what is happening, this idea of the Purusha and the Purusha Sukta, where the person, what is happening in the Purusha Sukta? The person, the supreme person, who is supernatural, infinite, and one, absolutely one, is calling on some principles of order, but they are lesser principles of order. They are called gods, to fragment it, calling the gods to break it up. So this breaking up of the one into the many, is a image that's being given to us. But this is what, in Sri Aurobindo's terminology, it is a kind of a term that he doesn't use very often, but he uses it sometimes. An eternal event. An eternal event. The word eternal event means event happens in time. Eternity is the opposite of time. In other words, this is like an image which is constant in time. This event of the breakdown of the Purusha is the image behind all time. So what is happening in this image is, in other words, we have to think this did not happen at some time. It is happening right now as well. It's happening through all time. That there is a power that is dispersing Purusha. And there is a power that is trying to unite Purusha back. These are the two forces that are at work. One is dharma itself. The other pole is adharma. Dharma is becoming adharma. Adharma is trying to reconstitute dharma. This is the very principle of time in the cosmos.
Yeah, but what is the purpose of this whole thing? Like breaking down the fragmentations to the dust level and again coming back to the two core cycles?
Yeah. The purpose of it is that if it was just coming back to the one of all, then there would be no purpose to it. It would just be a play. But the purpose of it is that if the fragmentation takes place, that's why I started by saying the yajna, the sacrifice of the absolute one is to its own potential for multiplicity. So the purpose of it is that the multiple, like all of us, we are multiple, we don't know each other, right? We don't know the unity, but we are striving for unity in two ways. One is we are striving for unity together. The other is we are striving to find the one in ourselves. Because in the breakdown of Purusha, Purusha still remains in every particle. The whole is present in the part. But the part forgets it. That's the dispersion. Dispersion can be thought of as the forgetting, the amnesia of the particles, the infinite particles of the one. So, in remembering it, each knows that it is the one alone, the whole. And in knowing that, they can reconstitute the one together as well. In every unity, in every group, in every collective, there can be the absolute present as well, in its own way. So, the knowledge of the one in the multiplicity would be the purpose of it, which is a new kind of oneness, which belongs only to time. Eternity does not know it. So you see, that would be the purpose of it. So this particular process, which is unfolding, which is the very meaning of time, in a sense, is a oscillation. There is a kind of a relative degree of fragmentation and a return to a sense of one. The later Puranic literature talks about these as the cycles that follow a fourfold process from Satya Yuga to the age of unity to the age of the obscuration of unity in 3 stages. And the final stage is the greatest dispersion, the night of God, Kali Yuga. And that in that age, it's like they say, the greatest night is just before dawn. There grows underneath it this power of unity, which is invisible. And at a certain point, there is a flip, and we return to the one. So, idea of the avatar as Krishna is giving it is that at those points when an age is about to end, the law of the age has broken down. So each of these cycles has a law, as it were. That is the relative law of unity of that cycle. All these laws are relative laws. The absolute law is the law of the Supreme, of Purusha. But in its fall, it goes through these stages in which something is held together by a law. And that law reaches a point where it doesn't work anymore. And when that happens, all conventions, all laws, all understandings seem to be relativized. And we seem to be falling into that chaos of absolute dispersion. And it is at that point that the avatar makes its appearance to bring back the order. Not the order of the past, but a new order. The order of the future. So, Krishna is not going to talk about it fully like this. He's going to talk about the return of order, which, there are a number of metaphors, both in the Mahabharata and in the Gita, that speak about the fact that in time there is this process of gradual dispersion that's going on. But the one that holds it all together is the Supreme. The Supreme stands behind it, holding it together. And when it seems to almost as if whatever holds together a particular cycle is about to break down, it makes its appearance. It intervenes. So this term intervention is central to the avatar. An intervention takes place. And that's where one may ask the question, why is an intervention necessary? Why isn't it built into the cosmic cycles for a remembrance to take place in human beings itself? And the answer, these are the answers that Sri Aurobindo gives us. It's not there in the Gita. The Gita will just talk about the return of Dharma. The answer is that the future is always bringing a new law. And that law is hidden from us. It's there in us, but it's hidden from us because it's almost like a layer of forgetting that's so deep that a cosmic remembrance is necessary. Individuals cannot remember it. And to remember it, the one that is fully conscious makes its appearance. That is the reappearance of the one, opening the door to that possibility that otherwise lies hidden behind the dispersion of the law that was the previous law of unity. There's another question. Somebody, yes, please.
So the question is, you mentioned that Purusha is a dharma.
Yeah.
And in Vedic sense, we say Purusha is a Sat, Chit, and Satya, Ritam, and Brihad.
Yes.
So what is the difference when you say Purusha is a dharma and Purusha is a Sat? Is there any difference between Sat and dharma?
No, there is no difference. So, rightly you pointed out the three primary principles of Purusha, Satyam, Ritam, Brihat. That could be considered another description of Dharma itself. You see, Dharma because that holds together. Sat or Satyam because it is truth. It is the fundamental existence. Only nothing else, it just exists. In a way, its inverse is matter itself. Because we can't say anything else of matter but that it exists. It's existence itself. So this is just pure exist. That's why it's true. Its final term is truth. Ritam means the law. In other words, Ritam is the term in these three terms that translates into Dharma. Dharma is Ritam. And Ritam means that there is a order. See, that one absolute being is self-ordered. And what does that order mean? That order means something so absolute. All the things that we call order are relative orders. That is the absolute order. It is not an ordering of some kind of symmetry. It is an ordering of the fact that it knows all its parts. So even the absolute chaos is its order. There is no fall from its order for itself. And Brihat is vast. So the notion of space comes in over here. Something that is extended infinitely. So this infinity of space, spatiality, is its property through which it creates the cosmos. So these are the properties of Purusha, as you said. And there is one, the primer, and then later we have Sat, Chit and Ananda. The primary property of this is consciousness. It is self-conscious. See? And its self-consciousness is what is obscured in its sacrifice, so to say.
So, as you said that with fragmentation, it kind of brings out that potential of manifesting as infinite, So, I was thinking that this new law that you talked about equally can be thought of as infinite number of cosmos itself, because each law actually kind of represents the cosmos.
Right.
So it's not only multitudinousness of beings, but multitudinousness of the cosmos.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes, you can think of it like that. Yeah, sure. You can think of it like that. Yes, John Robert.
Can you bring in delight at this stage?
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is the thing that Sri Aurobindo points out that, the descriptions, even when we are talking about vast, right? Vast, the word brihat, right? From which the word Brahman actually comes in the Upanishads, the term Brahman. There's first a kind of a mention of it in the Veda, but it means something else. It means the word. But in the Upanishad, it means infinite being. So this infinity, absolute infinity, horizonless infinity, is delight itself. This is how they will talk about it. Because if we think about the subjective experience of delight, the mother speaks about this, for example, that true bliss, true joy is experienced by us whenever we break a boundary. Something which binds us, something which holds us down, which we are subject to, when it's overcome, there is joy. And the subjective experience of absolute freedom is one of a infinite bliss for this reason, because it is radically infinite. It's absolutely free. See, that is its experience of bliss. So bliss, from that point of view, that is the experience of, part of the experience of dharma itself, is this notion of bliss.
Well, I was thinking about when Kavi asked about the purpose of the multiplicity.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, it's delight in the multiplicity.
Yeah, delight in the multiplicity. So there it becomes, when we are talking about the whole in the part, it becomes reconstitution of the whole is really the play of delight in the multiplicity, because the one recognizes itself in others. So looking at others and seeing oneself is this horizonlessness, this absolute freedom. This the fourth part of the Brihadaranyaka, first adhyaya, starts with this, that the Atman looked around, and wherever it looked, it saw itself. There was no other. See? That is the experience of horizonless bliss. Yeah.
You're speaking about the self-sacrifice of the Purusha,
Yeah.
and the purpose of that being to gain a greater oneness, this oneness that's reconciled with multiplicity.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand that in the context of this cyclical. Do we see this as like the purpose across cycles rather than just within one cycle as the sacrifice and a return to oneness?
Yeah.
Because then if it's within, then it's kind of an intuitive. Then why does the cycle start? Why do we fall again once we got the oneness and multiplicity? Or is something changing across cycles?
Yeah. So the idea is that each cycle manifests a certain degree of unity, you see, but it's not complete.
Sure.
It holds it over there, and it experiences within those bounds. But the idea is that there is, across the cycles, there is a increase of that takes place. So one may think about, and there Sri Aurobindo is talking about infinity, that there is no end, but there are transition points that are like movements from one entire stage to another. So even these cycles, they are relative, but certain cycles, as it were, are bigger transition points than others. And one cycle that would be a really big transition point is when this multiplicity recognizes itself to be the one. The whole multiplicity recognizes itself to be the one. It doesn't end there, because it moves into a different kind of cycle of self-recognition at that point. Another law starts. So it's like the law of these yugas are relative laws, but the law from one entire system to another is a bigger kind of, break in law. See? And that, what we're just talking about, is what Savitri is about. See? And that, in a way, is what Sri Aurobindo is talking about with regard to our age. He's saying it's another transition, but it's a transition that holds the possibility of a collective understanding of the one in a radical sense. That's the difference. Yes.
Jesus, what you're saying, this just seems sometimes that compassion and bliss are really close together. And so I think that the compassion, you're obviously feeling the suffering of the multiplicity.
Yeah.
But if you're feeling another's, there is that lack of separation, which is bliss.
Yeah. Exactly. Because compassion requires still this notion of something else that you can feel for. But bliss is a kind of intrinsic sense of one's own freedom. Yeah.
In the triple soul forces, we have the three Madonnas.
Yeah.
And each one believes that she is the Divine Mother.
Right.
And so would you say that each one has arrived at that level of identity with the one, but it's still incomplete?
Yeah.
That is, in that particular canto, Aurobindo is saying that it's not enough to have compassion, you must also have the knowledge and the power.
Exactly, absolutely. Exactly what you said, Prapanna. Each one of these knows itself to be the one, but not, it's still broken away, and that's the law of the overmind. The law of the overmind, each idea in the overmind knows itself to be the one, but it doesn't know itself to be one with the other. Right. It's like Keka's notion of the many cosmoses. It's like each cosmos is the one, but it doesn't know that it's the other ones as well.
Could it be that each one of those are a culmination of prior ages?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Because each one is a law to itself. Yeah. These are the relative dharmas. Each one is a dharma, but it's a relative dharma. So, this is the idea of the avatar. See, as Sri Aurobindo develops it when he's talking about the theory of the avatar in essays on the Gita. The other aspect of it is what is different between us and the avatar. We are also divine. We are no less divine than the avatar, because the divine has become all of us. And so, when we are talking about this dispersion that's taking place, the one is in the many, but the one is losing its sense of oneness in the many. However, why the difference takes place is that I mentioned the two major factors of loss. The first is the conscious becomes unconscious. It becomes inconscient. And the second is the one becomes the many. In the fact that the conscious becomes the unconscious, there is a certain principle that enters that precedes, as it were, the fragmentation of being. So when the fragmentation takes place, within the fragmentation, there is a loss of the sense of consciousness. That amnesia is very deep in each particle. While if the one comes into that particular system from its own home, it retains its consciousness, even though it is taking on the notion of being a single person. And that's the point that Sri Aurobindo is drawing from the Gita. When Krishna speaks to Arjuna in the second chapter, he's saying, there is a major difference between you and me, Arjuna. I remember all my past while you have forgotten. This remembering all one's past, this is the full possession of consciousness. The unconscious has not intervened and made one forget this fall that's taking place. The fall of consciousness, the lapse of consciousness is not there. And here is where we come to the notion of the Divine Mother. Because this lapse from full consciousness to the unconscious is actually the lapse of the Divine Mother. Sri Aurobindo calls this the Holocaust of Prakriti. So there are two holocausts according to him. One is the Holocaust of Prakriti and the other is the Holocaust of Purusha. The sacrifice of Purusha comes second. The sacrifice of Prakriti comes first. To lay the ground, to create the absolute inconscient, on which the seeds of God can flower. The seeds of God are the dispersion of the one into multiplicity. It falls into unconsciousness. And out of that unconsciousness, the unconscious flowers, evolves, tries to return to the state of the unity of Purusha and Prakriti. So this idea, this is the idea behind the notion of the Shakti avatar. And we'll come in a moment to why the Shakti avatar is so important and why Sri Aurobindo feels that that's the real savior power. Not the Purusha avatar, but the Shakti avatar. Yes.
When you say Purusha avatar and Shakti avatar, is there any connection about Shakti being feminine and Purusha being the opposite?
Yeah. So this is, of course, a very big area and in some ways a controversial area also. Because Sri Aurobindo seems to feel that gendering is an aspect of this particular separation that's taking place. Originally, there is, like when we are talking about Purusha, later, today, when we use the word Purusha, we mean male in India, you see. But Purusha, even in terms of its etymology, Indo-European roots, is actually person. The word person and Purusha are the same. Person is without gender. All beings have personhood. All living beings have a certain amount of personhood. Human beings have a more enhanced sense of being a person. Person ultimately is, the sense of person is coming to us from the psychic being. See? So this is like, but the psychic being actually is already an integration of Purusha and Prakriti. There is a degree of integration that's there. So Purusha as person has actually got both Purusha and Prakriti in it. Both are there in it. This is, in the Supreme, we don't use the term or terms, of Ishvara and Shakti, which is already divided. They're only one. But when this fall takes place, they divide into these two. See? One becomes the inconscience of being and becomes latent as consciousness in it. That's why in terms of divinity and the experience of divinity, we have two centers in ourselves. One is the Kundalini. It is the coiled serpent at the base. This is the Prakriti that is, or the element, the feminine element, the element of inconscience and the latency of consciousness in inconscience. The other is the psychic being, which is the Purusha in that sense. Also both of them have both in it. But that is the person in us that ultimately evolves and develops the fullness of personhood. So this doubleness takes place in the fall. See? So engendering, in a way, there is a certain kind of a nature, natural properties are in this sense more manifest in the feminine, and this property of transcendence is more manifest in the male. That is the idea that Sri Aurobindo is working on. The mother complicates that idea. She actually says these are conventions. She does not buy into that idea fully. She's saying, yes, we place these particular notions, but even if you reverse it, it doesn't matter. So there is a little difference, but nevertheless there is a certain kind of divisioning that's taking place over here. And for Sri Aurobindo, that divisioning seems to be important, because for him the Shakti avatar is feminine. Yes.
So when we say the Purusha is a pure consciousness, nirguna, so how and when he has to decide to be in a multiplicity? If it is a pure consciousness, nothing happened in the Purusha, right? Then
no, this is a mistake. Purusha is a pure consciousness, but it's not nirguna. It is anantaguna. It has infinite qualities. And this question is the most profound question. How and when does it decide? This question is asked inside time of something which is outside time. You can ask this question because you already don't know the state which is both time and timelessness. And you cannot answer this question until you have that experience. Any answer I give you will be a falsehood. This is the big paradox, the great paradox. And overcoming this paradox is one aspect of a change of age. You can change the age. Then, this is what Sri Aurobindo, this is the supramental. This question, how and when, belongs to a division between the timeless and time. The division is the Maya of overmind. See? We are in it. We don't know anything outside it. We are inside time. That's why we ask the question, when or how. But from the viewpoint of Purusha, that's why I use the term eternal event. Eternal event is a paradox. We cannot understand it, but it exists. It is always. It is happening right now for the first time. It happened at a time when we can't even imagine it. And it never happened. All these things. Yes.
So the falling into inconscience, was it as a result of an error, or was it an expected outcome?
So again we come to the falling into error, which is, we are talking in time. Let's for a moment consider that always the falling into error has been taking place. It is eternally taking place. There is no time when it did not take place. If you think like that, then you know there's no error. there is never an error. It is a law. It is the law by which the one becomes many. And the one is always becoming many. See, we are experiencing that in time. Ours is a certain experience of it. But first, there is no error. There is no error here. It's another form of bliss. Somebody asked, is it something greater bliss? I think one of you was a greater bliss. It's not a greater bliss. It's another kind of bliss.
So the concept of,
the
concept of people say son of God. So avatar is basically son of God, right? And multitude is sons of men.
Okay, now we are coming to Christ, because nobody used the word son of God for Vishnu avatar, right? Nobody used the word son of God for...
From the perspective of Christianity.
Right. So we have so far considered Krishna, we have considered Purusha, we have not considered Christ. If we are to consider Christ, that becomes avatar of a certain kind, a very specific kind of avatar. So you find, that's the reason I'm saying that idea of avatar, this is the fundamental idea of avatar, the descent. And I'm talking about the descent, the theory of the descent from the viewpoint of the Gita, where he's saying, I come to restore dharma when dharma is breaking down. This is not the same as the idea of the avatar in Christianity. Idea of the avatar in Christianity is also a mythical idea. You see, many people say Christ's life as a myth, as a symbol, was created by people like Paul and Augustine. See, they took a certain life and put it into a symbol. See, but that symbol is very profound. Whatever of it or however of it actually manifested, that symbol is talking about the avatar in a new way. See? And basically what it is saying is that there is a fall. There also a fall takes place. That fall is talked about in a different way in the Abrahamic myth about humanity that falls from a state of heaven. Okay? However it falls, let's not go into that. But there is a fall that takes place, a forgetting. So that is the same. There is a fall that's taking place. And to return from that fall, there is a tremendous force of forgetting that is preventing that which has fallen from returning. So the divine takes birth, but takes birth as that being that has fallen. In that sense, it is the Son of Man. Okay? And in that sense, the human avatars in the Hindu system are also sons of men or sons of humans. You see? Because they are actually taking birth. Krishna takes birth as a human being. You see? That's the meaning of being a son of man. Right? It's going through the process of birth. But this connects with what we were talking about, not forgetting. So in the Gita, and even before the Gita, or maybe not, it's later, the story called the Harivamsa, right, which is the story of Christ, of Krishna. Krishna is going to say, I take birth in a human way, but actually I press myself into birth. Sri Aurobindo uses the term for srijamyaham, srij, actually related to the term shrishti. Shrishti means to create. So shrishti, shrijamyaham, shrij, that dhatu shrij, the sound syllable shrij, means to press oneself, to press into birth. So even the word express, for example, holds that particular sense, to press, right? So the idea is that unlike other souls, we were talking about the difference. Other souls, they enter into the inconscience and they are being reborn within the inconscience. So the original forgetting remains with us from birth to birth. We are reborn in the forgetting, while the avatar retains its memory, and so it is not reborn within the inconscience. It presses itself into birth through the inconscience. You see? So that's why it is not through the process of Prakriti that it is born. You see, this is also happening in the case, the whole notion of the immaculate conception and the immaculate birth. In the case of Buddhism, it's an immaculate birth. He's born directly because they claim he's a master yogi. He knows how to break the boundary between the inside and the outside. You see? So this notion of pressing oneself into birth while retaining the memory of all the past, of the very origin coming through, that is the process by which the so-called Son of Man is born, and is a special kind of Son of Man. Now, avatarhood of Christ is one in which the symbol is talking about this being that has forgotten, remembering its past and entering the forgetting, and being killed by the forgetting. See, in other words, the forgetting is going to cover it. It comes with the remembrance, but it enters the forgetting, and the forgetting conceals it, covers it up. And then by the power of its own remembrance, it re-emerges and is victorious over that forgetting. See? That is in that sense, that is the transition that takes place. That is the law that is broken and the law that is returning. Now, that law is really the law of death, which is the law of the inconscient. See? So, this is the Purusha that is breaking the law of the inconscience. That is the idea. And in a way, it is a symbol for the evolution of divinity after this lapse takes place. That's the meaning of the Christ avatar.
I was just thinking back to the gender part, and if the lingam symbolically opposes any part of the Shakti or the Purusha or the property.
Yeah, now when we're talking about gendering, the gendering has got signs at many levels, and the sexual symbology, the signs, they're also signs, but they are not the only signs. See, they're the signs of procreation, because in the fall, you can't remember your divinity, and you experience your immortality through procreating others like yourself. It's the process inside the inconscience. You see, so that's why that symbol becomes the symbol of eternity or immortality in the inconscience. The word linga literally means sign. That's the meaning of the word linga. And so any kind of sign of the divine is called a linga. See?
Spine, can it be?
No, it's sign, S-I-G-N.
No, I'm saying
yeah.
spine, can it be also taken as a sign?
It could be, the word lakshana, for example, or, index, they say index. Any index is a linga. Okay, so we come to the notion of the Shakti avatar. So one other thing is, we talked about Christ, we talked about Krishna. Now, in the slightly later, we have the notion of many avatars. You see, so Vishnu Purana is going to talk about 10 avatars. This is what is popularly understood, and people think that Krishna is one of the 10 avatars. But it's good to know that idea of 10 avatars came much later than the idea of Krishna as an avatar. You see, idea of the 10 avatars are evolutionary. So here we come back to, the notion of the cycles. So each one of them represents a degree of the emergence from inconscience. So it's a degree of consciousness. So it's like when we are talking about cycles, it's not just these 4 cycles, but here we are talking about 10 cycles almost. See? And all of them are not happening on Earth. They are happening in other planes. But they represent different kinds of evolutionary emergences. Each one of them is, as it were, necessary for a greater degree of emergence out of a very deep forgetting. It's as if the pure consciousness takes that form so that the door to a new evolutionary step may take place. So that is the idea of the avatars in the Vishnu Purana. And Bhagavad Purana, there's already many more avatars. In the 20s, there's something 27 or something avatars. So it's getting pluralized. You see, there is no fixed number of avatars. You see, there are many avatars, and they don't necessarily come for the same purpose. They come for a number of purposes. So when we see the avatarhood of Christ, or the avatarhood of the evolutionary avatars, or the avatarhood of Krishna, there is something specific going on there, which is not necessarily the same. But there is a general law, which is the law of evolution, that's taking place in all these cases. Yes, you had a question.
So these cycles that you speak of, in material sense, are they also, do they coincide with the pralaya or Big Bang?
Well, pralaya is not necessarily a Big Bang. Okay? So, pralayas can be partial destructions. For example, there was a point of time when the dinosaur disappeared. A lot of life forms disappeared at that time. That can be considered a pralaya, for example. There are other pralayas like that. The appearance of marine creatures was preceded by a pralaya of that kind. A similar stellar event, astral event, a comet that falls and creates this kind of destruction of life. The coming of these avatars is not always related to pralayas, but it's related to a crisis of some kind. A crisis that may be related to a war or a large destruction or something of that sort. Yes.
So, my understanding is for the unmanifest to manifest, it comes through a form, and when that comes to a form to change some situation, it doesn't matter the form. It's the same force that comes to a Buddha or Jesus or whatever avatar it is. It's the same force, the same one power that comes through.
Yeah, it's the same being that comes through. But the being expresses a different kind of, purpose. The purpose is different. And so the qualities that are expressed are not the same. Different qualities are expressed, and a different purpose is expressed. Yeah, Sylvia.
How memory plays some kind of relationship with this memory?
Yeah, so, from the viewpoint of the avatar, that's why he's saying, I remember all my births, right? And that kind of memory also is a very interesting memory, because what does it mean to remember all one's births? If we see the examples, we find it's very close, In other words, in Krishna's case, they say his teacher just uttered a mantra and he remembered all his past lives. See? So this kind of, sudden remembrance, that is just, it's almost like you don't know that everybody else is like that, not like that. See, so because you have these kind of large memories that are just behind the surface, while for the others the memory is layered. We ourselves know that even in our lives we have short-term memory and long-term memory, and certain memories are much more clear to us, and even there is a qualitative difference. There is some memories that are like mental memories. You see, I remember that something happened, but it seems to have happened in the past. I just remember it as a kind of a story. And I remember some things that may have happened in the past, but they seem to have happened just yesterday. There is a quality as if they're living right now. Different forms of memory are involved over here. So in a way, we are a structure of multiple memories, multiple kinds of memories. The body has its own memory. We also have genetic memory. So memory is really, in a sense, multi-layered, and in this, and different degrees of forgetting are there in these different types of memory. So in the case of the avatar, it's as if all these forms are kind of very close to the fullness of remembering everything. And it sometimes takes a trigger. Something triggers, and immediately the memory is there.
So now this comes to me because you mentioned about Guru saying mantra and he remembers.
Yeah.
Since I was a kid, I always thought when Krishna was born, even though he had a purpose to come on a human form, until a certain age, I'm throwing just a number like 10 or 13 years, or maybe even younger, he was just a normal human being and not recognizing. But at some point in his life, everything came, that purpose of his avatar.
Right.
But it was hidden. Similarly, Sri Aurobindo, he had his political life and all the other previous years until he met Lele, and then he entered in yoga. But is there some similarities there?
Yeah, so that's why I was saying that it's very close, but it's not fully there. It takes a little trigger to make it come. And for different avatars, it's different, you see. So, for example, in some, like you brought up Krishna's case is very interesting because, even when he was a child, that story with Jashoda, who saw the Vishwarupa in his mouth, when she asked him to open his mouth, these stories are given because there is a degree of the full knowledge that is present all the time. But it's as if different parts of it reveals, right. Now, like in Savitri, Savitri is a book about avatars from a certain point of view. Ashwapati is an avatar. Savitri is an avatar. Even Satyavan is an avatar, actually. So, we find that these avatars are all different. They're manifesting their avatarhood differently. Ashwapati's avatarhood is like what you said. He doesn't know that he's an avatar. But he starts developing into a yogi in a miraculous way. Very quickly, yogic powers start coming to him.
I believe all that happens only when consciousness enters.
Yeah, yeah. But in the case of Savitri, from birth she knows that she's, as we'll see, she knows that she's special. It's almost like the memory is much stronger in that case. Now, in a sense, these stories are also a record of Sri Aurobindo and the mother themselves. To some extent, they're autobiographical. And in that sense, we can see that in the mother's life also, from she herself says it, from the age of 5, I knew who I was. And Sri Aurobindo says that she progressively manifested her divinity. She did not develop it. You see, just like we are talking about those who are born inside the inconscience, birth to birth, they have to put a lot of effort of consciousness to remember, talking about memory. But the avatar puts a little effort and everything comes because it's already there. You see? So that's the kind of difference that's shown over here.
I was also thinking that this Krishna, though he said that somebody uttered a mantra, but Putana, the story of Putana, that he was a baby, right? Infant baby.
Yeah.
So he actually killed her, killed that big asura.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing, like as you said that about Savitri, she already knew, and when she was confronting death, her whole power came out.
Yeah.
So I mean, do you see a similarity between that Krishna's infant killing Putana versus?
I think so. I think you see, it's a very interesting and important point. This power is there, but it needs a occasion to show itself. This is the whole thing about the story of Savitri. The circumstances that she has to face will bring the divinity out. If it never happened, she would have lived with a certain partial knowledge of her own divinity. It's when she's confronted with this, whatever force she's come to solve, it's the problem opens the doors and the entire power comes out.
So I think, the uttering uttering a mantra versus a poisonous milk or Putana. So that's the kind of, one is the knowledge aspect, the other is the power aspect. Something invokes the power and then power manifests.
Exactly. Yes. So we also, in thinking about, coming to a conclusive point of this avatar, Shakti avatar idea, Sri Aurobindo, he has a line over here, our life is a holocaust of the Supreme. The world mother by her sacrifice has made the earth something like a ground of all evolution. So this idea that the inconscience, which is ultimately the deep forgetting in which we live, that is, it relates to the discussions we are having about different layers of forgetting inside us. The ultimate layer of forgetting is matter itself. It is the first manifestation of the inconscient. And that is where the Divine Mother resides. So from that point of view, she works within us. She works in the immanence. She works in the deepest forgetting. And if the complete transformation is to come, it requires her power. This is where Sri Aurobindo is coming from in claiming the power of the Shakti avatar. So the Shakti avatar, as she does over here, confronts death, which is the power of forgetting of matter itself.
Say one more time. Say one more time.
The Shakti avatar, her entire purpose is to confront death, which is the power of forgetting of matter. Matter, which is consciousness that has become fully objective by forgetting itself. The subject has become the shell of itself, has become the object. It is death itself.
So that's where we need a lot of that in the vital.
So this is the physical. The vital is also there, but the vital is a degree of consciousness more than the physical. She is confronting the physical itself. And that's why in the mother's own life, you find that she goes through these stages where finally she is confronting the physical. And she says that I've thrown away my mind, I've thrown away my vital, I'm only this body. You see? And everything is to be experienced here. So this kind of reduction to a confrontation with matter, that in a sense is what is happening here. And what Sri Aurobindo is saying, coming around to what Savitri, is that this, see, what is the purpose of, coming back to the purpose? What is the purpose? One purpose, I said, is the multiplicity and the bliss, the play of multiplicity. But one purpose is the full awareness, the full consciousness of divinity down to matter. See? So these cycles, each one is going deeper into a layer of unconsciousness. And the ultimate layer of unconsciousness is matter itself, which needs to be overcome, made conscious. And that's also in a way why the Christ myth or the mythos is talking about the overcoming of death. You see? Because that in a way is the completion of the cycle. That which is most unconscious has to become conscious. See? But in Sri Aurobindo's case, he's saying it will require the Shakti avatar. The Purusha avatar can achieve it for itself, but ultimately it will require the Shakti avatar because it's the power of inconscience in matter and in the vital, the internal power of divinity that has to manifest.
This is making me sort of realize that Islam, I think they have something they don't realize that that's really something enormous. And because in the Kaaba, there is the most holy place for Islam is a black stone. And I feel like that there is this sense, this sacred sense of matter. But I don't think they have I don't know what you would call it, the esoteric understanding of what it is, their intuition, but they don't fully understand it.
Yeah, but there's many layers to it because, it's like an aniconic icon. It's an icon, but they claim that there should be no icon. You see, so there is a contradiction over there. If they accepted that icon to be divine matter, then it would be something else. But it's almost like they don't want to acknowledge that there is any icon, yet they turn to that icon.
Yeah. Maybe going back to the mission of Krishna, if his mission was to sort of clear the field of the law that existed at that time, and at the end of Kurukshetra, would you say that his mission was fulfilled, or was there more to do antecedent to that time? And tying that into Mother, in Savitri, she doesn't quite destroy death. She puts death on notice.
Right.
So there's still work yet to be done.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about the antecedent to the incarnation fulfilling a mission.
Yeah.
And how that relates to the times we're living today.
Yeah. Very important question. The mission of the avatar achieves itself at many levels. See, so Krishna, for example, and let's take that case because you talked about Kurukshetra. He achieves his mission in several levels. in the general, he achieves his mission through a political change. See, in other words, at that time, in whatever we are calling Bharat at that time, there was this manifestation of chaos that was going to take place with this rule that had emerged, you see, with the Kauravas, right? But, in a way, I mean, that Sri Aurobindo also holds this view that the whole Mahabharata is really being catalyzed by Krishna. And he's also, an agent that's making it move towards what happens. So, in the turning over through the war into a new kind of government, so to say, the government of Yudhishthira, the government of a kind of an enlightened king, you see, something is achieved. This is the return of a higher law. In a way, Sri Aurobindo and the mother living through the Second World War, trying to work for the return of the higher ideals of civilization, so to say. It's something that is very uncannily present with us right now. Because this is again a fall of the similar kind that's taking place across the world. So that is one level on which it happens. But there's an esoteric level at which it happens. And that is happening in the Gita. Because not only is he giving a teaching for the future, he's also giving a revelation that is the revelation of the 10th and 11th chapters, where he's showing his Vishwarupa. And that's a supramental vision. Because he's giving it to somebody who can't even receive it. Arjuna says, I can't take it. And Sri Aurobindo is saying over there in Essays on the Gita that it's almost like a flagpost to the future. So he's saying, to the vanguard of this age that is passing, I'm giving the seed for the next age. This is the achievement that is held out, as it were. You see? So I think it's in that sense that he gives a partial dharma, return of the dharma, but also opens the door to the greater dharma and passes the seeds on to whatever can receive it to be worked out over the next age. Yeah, Jim.
In thinking about the different examples here at different levels, say with the avatars or with the mother, these gradual unfolding and perhaps triggering through a life event or something, I'm thinking that that's what each of us is facing. That's what our individual lives are, an opportunity to achieve.
Right.
And that you could think of like you may set off in a certain direction in life, but you meet a teacher or you discover some scripture and it just turns you in another direction. You know, oh, this is the proper path for me now.
Right.
And to keep following those impulses, those intuitions perhaps, with the faith and the aspiration that you will achieve more understanding, more
right.
sense of purpose. And so
yeah, exactly. So it's like saying that what is the place of the avatar, right? The avatar, just like we were talking with either with the case of Krishna or the case of Christ, it's almost like we're saying that somebody came and achieved something in an esoteric way, which was such a deep forgetting that we would not be able to otherwise remember it. But in their having achieved it, the potential lies for everybody to now achieve it. And then what happens is that in our lives, like you said, we become apprentices to signs. See, we experience these signs because the possibility is there, and if we follow the signs, then we are led to that achievement that has already been had. Sri Aurobindo has the line, "In the beginning is prepared the close." The beginning is the beginning of a cycle. And that's why he starts with the symbol dawn. The symbol dawn is in a way the penultimate day of Savitri, of the story. But it's also the beginning of a new cycle, you see, where Savitri's achievement is going to become a possibility for all of us, you see. So from that point of view, it opens the door to something new. And that relates to Savitri in this way, that Savitri is a story about something happened long, long back. It's a story about something that the Veda were writing about. In other words, just like, the symbol of the Christ's life, this itself, this whole story is an eternal event that has opened its doors for all of us, and that is repeated again and again by others who are special. So whatever was achieved in the story of Savitri at a very early stage of human existence was repeated in another way in our times in the lives of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. They return in a way to be some of these beings. These beings are returning. And that's why we will find in the case of Savitri herself, repeatedly he's going to say, once more that person comes back, you see. Once more the effort is renewed, you see. So, and the Mother has said, whenever there was even a little consciousness to be expressed, I was there. See? So these returns of the Shakti avatar is something which is reopening a door that was opened almost right in the early beginnings of human history. Yes.
Devashish, at one point you said that it might have been Savitri, but certainly some of Sri Aurobindo's writings was written for the future audience. And that brings to mind that seeds of the future Dharma are in Savitri.
Yes, undoubtedly. Yeah. Yes,
we're
Sasha.
getting close to time.
Okay. Sasha.
I think this. I'm kind of taken by this thought right now about the eternal event and thinking about Christ's life and Krishna's life at the same time, and how the transfiguration of Christ can sort of be, in some ways, related to that experience that Arjuna had in chapters 11 and 12, when he experiences this thing he couldn't see, couldn't bear, this true expression of what Krishna is.
Yeah.
And in the transfiguration of Christ, it's before he goes into the passion. So this is on his way to basically be crucified.
Right.
The beginning of this motion towards Bethlehem. And the people that witnessed the transfiguration, they could bear it though.
Yeah.
Unlike Arjuna. And that it's kind of, I'm just thinking about this right now and what that means. But in the transfiguration, they witnessed Christ in a light body. In a body that was beyond death, basically.
Right.
And they witnessed him decide to not just stay there, but to come back, knowing full well he was going to be crucified. Right. And it's kind of interesting to think about the difference in that. But in the same way, there's some eternal event occurring in both stories.
Yeah.
And a suggestion that we enact this in our own lives.
Yeah.
That we can engage with this because it's happening, like you said, that one line you said where you were like, it's happening in the past, in the now, in the future, in this way that's so multidimensional.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
It is, yes, true. Yeah. Yes, Sylvia.
I am kind of thinking about the effort. So the avatar comes with, it doesn't have the sense of effort. Where is the context where we talk effort?
Yeah.
It's such an important aspect.
Yeah, Yeah, effort is always needed because that's happening in the inconscious. As I said, there is a drop into the inconscious, and then all of when we are talking about these two forces, that there's something that is constantly pulling us down and trying to make us forget. You see, and the effort is against that, really. So in the avatar's case, the avatar is an intervention because the avatar in a way is helping us to undertake an effort too much for us at this point, you see. That's the whole theology of the avatar. And many people don't buy into the idea of the avatar for this reason, because in a sense they're saying it's almost too easy. Why should it be that God gives us a free hand, but as a matter of fact, the theology of it, according to Sri Aurobindo, is that there are these really deep forgettings that require the seals of death, as it were, that the opposite of consciousness is so deep that within it, by our unaided effort, because we are already so, the fragmentation takes place, and it's like the light becomes so dim in each particle. There's so little of it. Of course, behind it, the whole thing is there, but the forgetting is real. There's so little of it that in being able to come together and actually remember it, that's the reason why we die. I mean, in the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo is saying that death itself, the experience of death, is really a challenge. It's a challenge to remember. So, we are immortal. We are eternal. But we don't remember it, right? And repeatedly we die because we don't have the power to remember. So this question of power, where the mother, again, that's where the Shakti avatar comes in. The mother is saying at one place, everything is a matter of power. See? From a certain point of view, everything is a matter of power. Because it's power of consciousness. How conscious can you be? And we are working, the effort is against impossible odds. It's almost like the opposite of consciousness that we are trying to work against. And that's the whole notion of struggle. That's why the word work in Karma Yoga, what is work? Ultimately, work in Karma Yoga is the struggle for consciousness to be born and to endure. So I think, we carried this to almost lunchtime, and maybe we'll start after lunch. Are we at lunchtime right now? Right? Okay. So I think we can go for lunch and come back for our